Okay, guys, welcome to this wealth creation show for this afternoon. Exciting times. We are going to be talking about today, and welcome to the viewers on TikTok, by the way. We are going to be talking today about assets and liabilities. Why is it the case that an asset could be a liability and can be a liability be an asset? And what does that actually entail and what the two things are? Because, until I did accountancy, I had no idea what anybody's talking about. It just went straight over my head. I had no idea what an asset was. I had no idea what a liability was. And and to be honest, even when I did it at school, I had no idea. That's why I failed accountancy miserably. How could someone fail accountancy miserably at school, at high school, yet go into college and actually be the top student 3 years in a row in accountancy? Work that one out.
Well, I wasn't a top student, but it wasn't until I got to college and done the accountancy part of my course and that I realised obviously exactly what the class asset and liabilities as. But as we touched on at the weekend on the show and obviously said we would discuss further today, can an asset be a liability and vice versa? Can a liability be an asset? So let's have let's go through it today.
More instantly, Richard. Let's talk about who's the next Prime Minister.
or who's due to be.
You know why I'm laughing? Because the both of them will make no difference to the quality of my life. It will make no difference because I've broken out of this system completely, and I don't want to play their game. And I think this is what the Wealth Creation Show is all about. It's all about teaching people to empower themselves so they can make the decisions for themselves and they can take control of their own financial future. This is why we go in depth into all these different details. And we're up to episode 35 now. So there's 34 other episodes on this playlist that we have on YouTube, which will go over all the different things for property investment, for wealth creation, for opportunity cost, opportunity loss, risk analysis, sensitivity analysis, all these different things you had no idea existed, which you can use as tools to control your financial future and the people round about you. That is the key here. Don't let other people make the decisions. It's the failure. You know what somebody once said to me? What was it? You are where you are. Somebody far more successful than me, by the way. You are where you are, Richard, but because the decisions you've made or you failed to make and other people have made for you.
Yeah.
That was pretty hard hitting.
Yeah.
And that was.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's like I never realised that.
Start to question yourself.
You know the reason why? Because it was a time when I was extremely challenged up here, and I was almost like a blame game. Blaming other people for where I am right now and being upset with that and saying it's everybody else's fault, and they were just basically bringing me right back and saying, well, to be honest, Jim, it's because the decisions you've failed to make and actually let other people take these decisions for you about your future. And I thought it was upsetting in the beginning. Kind of thought, ooh, that's a bit harsh.
Yeah, but I think with a statement like that, it makes you look at yourself, maybe accept the fact that you've not obviously grabbed your future and made your own decisions, but then it allows you to then think, right, this is what I need to do now. And I think in terms of learning and building wealth and things, these shows, like you just said, that are all through the playlist, they're brilliant. And since I've joined you doing them on a regular basis, I've learned so much as well. And there's something there for everybody. So they really are quite good. So please listen back to them, guys, if you're looking to learn and pick up things.
Do you think that's with repetition is the mother of all skill? Definitely. And actually discussing it over and over again. And sometimes, because we talk about, in a previous show, but the reality is we keep discussing it all the time because it strengthens your knowledge in that field. And it also gives you a higher insight into what you should be doing next in order to take control of your own future.
Yeah.
So to hell with it. Who cares who's going to be the next Prime Minister? That is the reality. They're not going to make any concessions for anybody. They're never going to pretend to help people. But in essence, their coherent policies or their incoherent policies are only designed to appeal to the masses. And unfortunately, the people on the periphery fall out of that, and it doesn't appeal to them at all, and it doesn't help them at all. And this is the people probably at the least the 10% of people who actually don't have anything at all and are really struggling. And that will grow to increase as we grow to increase. But this is why we teach people and tell people about how to create that wealth for yourself.
I mean, going by social media this morning, I think Liz Truss is the front runner. But there were totally castigating her this morning because she's gone on about, oh, I'm going to do like the road speed limits the same as Germany and things, and like people are like, who cares? Like, let's address the topics that are relevant at the moment. There's no speed limits.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Never mind about blooming road speed limits and stuff like that. Let's just get the matter right down. And I believe wholeheartedly she's been appointed as the fall person for all the next calamity that's coming. she's going to be, and mark my words for it, she will be the person that is blamed for everything that's about to happen. Just like Boris Johnson.
Theresa May as well. She was a bit of a fall.
Theresa May was there for as well. It's a poison chalice right now. No one wants to inherit this. What's about to happen, the cost of living crisis, and everything that's going to happen out of that. So that's why I think they're actually wanting her to be in there, so they could use her as that fall person. And Rishi will be saved for a later date, and it's like, let's just wheel him out when everything's fine now, and everybody will go the guy of stability, and it's like, but I've seen all this before. You've no Richard, but I'm 20 years ahead of you, but I've seen it all before. It's like
I go back as far as John Major. I think that's probably the first one I remember.
It reminds me of the parody of the New Statesman, which Rick Mail used to do. Because Rick Mail was a complete socialist, but he did that parody of Alan Bastard, that the New Statesman, and he did satirize exactly what I'm talking about right now, about the person. Oh, right, it's going to be tough times ahead. Let's put somebody in we can get rid of later on and blame them for it. Or I tell you what, let's lose the next election because we're not really wanting to inherit what we've got now, and we'll let them mop up all the difference, and then we'll say, oh well, but we sorted all that on the way. Anyway, that's another story. Let's talk about liabilities. I could become completely engrossed in all this. Assets and liabilities. It really is all about becoming financially savvy. It's essential to understand the difference between assets and liabilities, and why they actually matter. Luckily, you don't need to head back to school to brush up on this and your money management terms, because we can tell you all about this right now. So, Richard, do you want to cover what is an asset? And I'll throw in, what I'm thinking, and in the bare bones of things.
Yeah, I mean, basically, an asset is anything that you own that has any economic or monetary value. And examples of that are obviously cash, pensions, and of course, property.
And it could be things as well, like, for example, gold, could be silver. So it's more tangible, but then I'll get into the realms of another thing. It's maybe an asset as well, and it's an intangible asset. It's things like goodwill. I know it sounds daft, but when you buy a company and that company has got a huge brand name, for example, Coca-Cola, Amazon, all that, they have what they call an intangible asset. So it's something that you can't actually feel. It's not material, but it does have intrinsic value to it. And that's what a brand is. It has an intrinsic value to it. It's literally, if you sell it on, it's classed as, they call it goodwill. So it's, in other words, you've paid a bit more than what the company is truly worth on the nuts and bolts, on the assets minus liabilities. And we'll talk about what liabilities is. In other words, what you own against what you owe, divide minus each other, and then it's worth a bit more than that. That's the goodwill. That's intangible. That's what other ones as well is possibly revaluation of property. That's another asset class, because the property is going up in value. So in order to recognize it on your balance sheet, in other words, on your, I'm getting into the realms of balance sheet now. The balance sheet is a snapshot of where you are right now at that point in time. So in other words, if you took a camera, this is how I was taught in accountancy, if you took a camera and took a picture of you right now in terms of your financials, what you had and what you owe, and then you took that is what the balance sheet is. In other words, that is what your net worth is at the bottom, assets minus liabilities. Again,
that's a good way to explain it.
Net worth, So that's how I was taught when I first got into accountancy. You take a camera, you take a snapshot. Now, the profit and loss, which goes alongside that, is a reflection of what happens in the year or the period of time that you've done something. In other words, what you've gained against what it's cost you. And an easy way to look at your profit and loss is what you're actually earning in income is your sales. In other words, what you're earning from your salary, that's your sales in a profit and loss account against what it costs you to do everything else. In other words, my mortgage, my car, my electricity, my gas, my council tax, my food, my clothes, my entertainment. That's the expenditure. So income,
travel and things, yeah.
And that's what profit and loss account is. And that gives you your profit or your loss at the end of the year, which is what you've got left. And if you've got anything left, to be honest.
By the time you pay travel costs and utilities in this day and age, yeah, you've not got much left to play with.
When you look at it like this, and you take away income minus your payments, what you're actually outlaying, and you have what's left at the profit at the end or the loss, that will either increase or decrease your balance sheet. See how that works? How that all fits in now? So profit and loss is what you do during the year or the period of time you're measuring, and the balance sheet is a snapshot at that time when you stop it. So that's why you have a profit and loss and a balance sheet for a company. And they can get into the realms of things like cash flow statements, but that's to show you where your cash is going. Yeah, because you could think you're worth more because your customers, you've done a job for your customers, but if you've not been paid the money yet, you've sold them something. So it makes you look like you're actually making money and profit because you've sold them something, but you've actually not got the cash yet. So that shows as a debt in your balance sheet. Therefore, but it's only realizable. This is why the cash flow statement is important, because if you don't have a cash flow, all your money could be tied up in debtors and people that owe you money. It could be tied up in stock, things that you've made to sell to people, and therefore you could run out of money. And actually, so you can be very profitable and actually run out of money.
Yeah.
And then that's you out of business. That's a weird one, eh? How to be really profitable, but actually be out of business because you've not got enough money, liquidity. That's how the banks work.
Yeah.
That's how they ran out of money because they had no more money, no more cash to lend. That's how the credit crunch happened because they had no more money to give people. We've got no money to give you. We can't give you your money back. Maybe we look solvent, but when you look at the money they've got in the bank, actually cash, like what you talked about here, we can't actually give you any cash back. So that's why they basically says banks are in trouble, credit crunch. So they couldn't lend anymore because they had no more money to lend. Anyway,
so assets can be liquid or they could be fixed.
Yeah,
that's what you're
absolutely.
saying. Yeah. So I mean, like a liquid asset is one that you could sell quickly and then easily convert into cash without negatively affecting its value.
That's things like, well, if you look at it in your day-to-day stuff, it's like maybe you've got a table you want to sell on eBay.
Yeah.
That could be sold quickly. You've got a mobile phone, it's an old one, and you think, okay, I could sell it for £100. That's liquid assets.
Yeah.
You've got, I don't know, well, stock is a classic example of that. And what else is a classic example of that?
Money in your savings account.
Yeah, that's money in your savings account. That's a good example of that. Yeah. What else do you think?
So yeah, well, money in your savings account. Now, what about savings in like if you're building up, obviously. So what about your pension fund then? That wouldn't be a liquid asset.
No, that would be fixed. That would be more a fixed asset. That would be purely for the fact that you can't get that until a period of time elapses and you're 55 onwards. So it's only your pensions only becomes a liquid asset when you actually cash in the pension. When you start to draw it down. So it is an asset. You do have money in a savings account, but it's locked into a pension. So it's not a liquid asset until you actually start to draw it down. Then it becomes a liquid asset because you can access it at any point in time now because you've actually changed the use of it.
And then obviously investments such as like stocks and things will be examples of liquid assets as well.
Stocks and shares, it depends. You could have stuff that for example, you could have debentures. That is a fixed asset really because you've bought that as a savings, but it's fixed for a period of time that you'll get a certain return. And
so
if
that's
you
the way to
cash
change.
that in, and while you can cash that in, you'll have penalties there. So that's when it probably would be a fixed asset. So fixed asset is it's something that you really can't liquid. You can't make it liquid straight away. It takes a wee bit of time. A house, for example, is a fixed asset. So property is fixed asset, and it's because you can't realize that just like that. You can't really just do it. I mean, some people you can to a degree. You could borrow in it, but we'll talk about that anyway. So it is something that you'd have to then put on the market and sell. So that's how it would. So fixed assets can also be turned into cash, but the process of converting them takes more time. In some cases, a fixed asset might actually lose value when you convert it to cash too soon or too quickly, as I just said.
So it's about doing it at the right time.
Yeah,
the
pensions. I mean, you leave the money in account till you reach the retirement age, as I said, and it means you can then draw it down and it becomes a liquid asset. If you need to take the money beforehand in the retirement account, you might need to pay maybe 10% or something like that for an early withdrawal penalty. Plus pay income tax and a certain distribution in most cases. Another one, it's an asset, assets to me is I've got a limited companies. So my limited companies are assets in my name because I own the shares in them. The limited company is a legal entity in its own right, and it trades in its own right with a profit and loss and balance sheet and assets and liabilities, but I own the shares in that company. So therefore, that's a valued asset to me based on what that net worth of that company is. So in my balance sheet, that is a fixed asset to me because you can't just sell a limited company like that. However, the dividends I get from that company is a liquid asset.
Yeah, they're a liquid asset,
Yeah, because effectively I could just pay myself dividends and that'll be cash.
Yeah.
So that's another way of looking at it as well. In addition to retirement accounts and pensions, example of fixed assets include your home, real estate, as I said. Building wealth means you build assets.
Yeah.
That's the key here. Ways to do so, it may include saving for emergency funds, save money in your pension fund, buying the bonds, as I said, treasury bonds, investing in art and jewellery and crypto.
We'll not go down the crypto route today.
Crypto is not an asset. Crypto is a gamble. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's back at 2019 or 2018 prices. So don't kid yourself if you think crypto is actually going to make you any money. It doesn't produce anything, does it? It's just speculation. So while it may be classified as an asset in people's minds, it's only worth what it is at the time. So it's so volatile that you wouldn't want to even do that. Property is definitely the best asset class you've got.
Yeah.
People recognize it as an asset because you can touch it, you can feel it, and it's like it does something. So that's really important as well. Yeah. So what would you think is a lot? Sorry, Richard, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say before you jump up, because I know we're going to go on and then talk about liabilities, but Mark's chipped in here with quite a good question, and I'm just going to share it, and we're going to cover in a wee while. But so Mark's saying if your mortgage is a liability and your house is an asset, how do you balance that? Now we're going to talk about that. We're going to actually talk about, Jim, you're going to talk a wee bit later at the end if we've got time to talk about your own property, how you've kind of changed your own property from a liability into an asset.
So can I answer that question now?
Yeah, go for it.
So classic example, Mark, if your mortgage is a liability, no, I'll put that on deliberately. If your mortgage is a liability and your house is an asset, how do you balance that? Okay, so your house is an asset. So for example, my house is probably worth £400,000. Therefore, my mortgage is only £130,000. So therefore, when you look at it like that, then my equity, in other words, what I've got, what I own net worth wise, is one minus the other. So 400 minus 130 comes to 270,000. So my net worth in that simplistic world is 270,000. And that's how people go, your wealth is 270,000. So that's the asset minus the liability. However, we'll keep that till later on. Your house can actually be a liability. We'll talk about that in the context.
We'll talk about liabilities first.
No, let's not confuse it. Let's get it straight first. What is what? So everybody understands that. And then we'll start to talk about, just throw that out the window because it's no true. But this is accountancy terms, remember. This is how accountants look at it. So what's a liability, Richard?
Yeah, a liability, I mean, well, basically a liability is a debt. And a debt which is obviously maybe possibly like we just spoke about a mortgage, things like student loans.
Right. Can I just say, A mortgage is another word for a loan, but it's exclusive to a house. That's all. So if people talk about loans and they talk about mortgages, loan and mortgage is the same thing. It's just that mortgage is always with a house. That's the only way. That's how it's termed. It's called a mortgage. You can say it's a loan if you want. It's the exact same thing, but it's just termed as a mortgage. Everything else outside a house is a loan.
For the purpose of this exercise, I actually did. I mean, you could do it yourself, but it's actually, the word mortgage is defined in the dictionary as a legal agreement by which a bank or a building society lends money at interest in exchange for taking the title of a debtor's property.
You've been doing your homework.
I mean, obviously you could Google that, but that's how it's defined in the dictionary.
Yeah. And another one as well is you've got things like, well, student loans is a classic for personal debt. Credit card debt is another thing. That's a liability. Other liabilities would be people that you owe money to. So anybody you owe money to, really a liability. And mortgages and debt and that's probably the easiest one. Although a liability sounds like something that would always be financially
unideal,
I would say. Yeah, that's a good word. Since it takes money out of your pocket, it's not always the case. For example, you may take out a mortgage to help to buy a house. As you pay down the mortgage, you build up equity in your home. Once the mortgage is paid in full, you own the home. So it sounds like something unideal, but in essence, it's possibly necessary for you to build equity. But that's not necessarily the way I would build equity, and we'll talk about that a bit further. Student loans are other examples of liabilities, and they can have a positive impact on your finances. If you borrow money to go to school, you might be more likely to find a higher paid job than you would if you didn't take the student debt loan. In other words, if you didn't go to university, you didn't actually have a loan for surviving. But here's another story. You know the story. My daughter took the student loans and actually made more money with the student loans because she took the student loans and invested into help to buy ISAs.
How you use
and the help to buy ISAs made her more money than the student loans were costing. So therefore, she actually made money out of the student loans.
That's a good example. And it's like whether it's a student loan or whether it is a mortgage or whatever you're taking it, it's how you use that to leverage your position.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
now, that said, paying down liabilities is essential if you hope to build wealth. When you have a lot of liabilities, they stand in the way of you investing in assets and saving money for your retirement and financial goals. Now, this is the key here. Liabilities and assets. When you have liabilities, some liabilities are actually good liabilities. We talk about good debt. Now, it's something you're never, ever taught at school about having good debt. But if you can make more money on someone else's money that you're lending to you, then it is actually probably a good proposition. A classic example of that is, and we could talk about it now, is the typical buy-to-let property. If you're making a 15% net return on your money, and you can borrow money from the bank at 5%, you're making a 10% differential every single time on the bank's money. That is leverage. So, and that's how businesses do it. Businesses do that every single day, day in, day out. They balance their liabilities. And to me, a liability is an asset sometimes. You know, this is what I keep talking about liabilities can sometimes be assets. Now, let's go on. Let's talk about net worth and everything like that. We'll get into that. I'm excited about talking about that. So how do you let's talk about how you reduce your liabilities, Richard, because we're responsible here, because people are actually, they'll not want to do what we're talking about right now in the Wealth Creation Show, and that's fine. We'll talk about that towards the end, but we want to talk about how do you reduce your liabilities. So how do you do that, Richard?
I think if you've got a lot of liabilities and very few assets, it can be challenging to kind of make ends meet. So if you want to reduce your total liabilities, the first step you need to do is stop creating more debt. And that's what a lot of people fall, because they just keep accumulating more debt, and then you become at that position. So if you continue adding debt and you're paying off existing debts, then you'll find yourself in a kind of peculiar circle that'll just and you'll never get out of that loop.
And we all fall foul of it. So I fell foul of it in the very beginning. So in the very beginning, when I first started, I used to get a car on debt, because how we look at it and how we are taught is how much money have you got every month? And this is how people think. How much money do I have every month? I've got maybe £1,000 a month. Okay, I've got all my stuff I've got to outlay on. I've got £200 left. What can I borrow for £200 a month? See what I've just done there? What can I borrow for £200 a month payments? This is how people work. This is how the Provi pay. This is how the Provi actually, and the lender shark actually prey on people, because they need the money there instantly to do something, and all they do is look at how much is it going to cost me every week. And if you say it's going to cost you £2.50 every week, people go, oh, I can afford £2.50 a week to get the £500 loan. But what they're failing to tell you is the APR is like 490%. Yeah. And maybe it is £2.50 a week for the next 5 years. But when you calculate £2.50 every week for the next 5 years, your £200 loan ends up being about £600 you're paying back.
Yeah.
That's how they do it, because we always look at what can we afford. So when you have that bit extra money left, it's like you look at, and this is why they're advertising car payments as well. How much can you afford? It's like you can rent this car, or you can have this car for £250 a month, and then you go to yourself, wait a minute, I can afford £250 a month. And you think to yourself, okay, I can have that. I can have a new car for £250 a month. That would make my life so much easier. I get to A to B quicker, and you didn't get to A to B quicker, to be honest. It's a ruse. Don't kid yourself. It's like, be honest with yourself. You have to work out how much you're actually accumulating in debt, because when you're getting the car, the overall amount you're having to pay back is astronomical. So then maybe it costs you £250 a month, but you've just accumulated a liability, a debt. And it's going to go on your bottom line to your net worth. Remember, it's what your net worth is affected that's more important than, and your cash flow is important day to day and week to week and month to month, what you've got left. But it's more important over the medium to long term. Your wealth, in other words, your assets actually start to increase as a result over that long term period. It doesn't need to be huge amounts. We talked about this morning, Ian and I, we talked about when we were going round. I always talk about this 1% improvement every single day, and maybe putting away a wee bit and doing that 1%, and it compounds to 350% over a year. Because imagine if you do that 1% negative every single day, it compounds to minus 365% over a year.
It works the other way. I thought about it like that.
Yeah, it works the other way as well, doesn't it? So you want to just what, and this happens because what you do is you go, oh, I'll just have a cup of coffee at cost of the day. Oh, I'll just have,
that's me. That's me.
I'll just, it's only £3. It's only £3. So you just look at it in the context of just that point in time. It's only £3. But if you do £3 every single day over the year, which is 365 days, you're talking about £1,200.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Or thereabouts. I do the swimming. I hire a lane every single week for the swimming, and that's £21. But when you took it in this context of £1,000 a year for swimming,
it's a lot.
Sounds different, eh?
Yeah.
Now, I just want peace of mind because I don't want anybody.
You don't want anybody in your lane. That's all.
I just want to swim back and forward. I don't want anybody in my way. And to me, that's worth it. That's my peace of mind. I don't go to pubs and clubs and all the rest of it, really. And I don't drink. You know that yourself. So I choose to spend my money on things that will be better for my lifestyle. So therefore, swimming a mile in the pool every week is one of my mantras to keep me on top of my game and keep me active and fit, because it is fantastic. And here's a wee key here. It's fantastic thinking time when you're doing things like that. When you're running, when you're walking, when you're cycling, when you're swimming, when you're doing anything like that, it's brilliant thinking time. It just puts everything into perspective, and it lets you see the world in a completely different way because you now have time to think. I've seen people, Keith Cunningham, Rich Dad, I couldn't believe it. He says, I schedule time in my diary to think. Like, what? Sorry, say that again? You schedule time in your diary to think. Yeah, I do thinking time. And I just didn't know what to say for that. And now I get it. Thinking time is probably one of the most important things because it allows you to actually step back and see a bigger picture and actually then come back in and into the micro. So you go out to macro, which is the bigger picture. You go into micro, which is the minuscule detail. And sometimes you've got to come out. You can't see the forest for the trees, is the expression, isn't it? Because you're so close to it. It's right in your face, and it's like you can't see anything round about you. And then when you come right back, you go, there it is. That's what I'm looking for. You now see a bigger picture, and that's why that's important. So thinking time is extremely valuable to help you in that process.
Yeah.
So don't get caught up in this scenario of immediately thinking you've got a couple of £100 a month, a car's only £250 a month. It's not. It's a 5-year commitment of £250 a month, which effectively, if I could find my calculator somewhere, wherever it is, I had it somewhere. Richard, you got a wee calculator somewhere?
Yeah, but I mean, I do think. I mean, when you think people do think that, oh, it's just £250, but if you, I mean, a 5-year commitment's a lot. Sorry, I've got my calculator here.
Oh, my phone's right in front of me. It's broadcasting on TikTok. I'm looking for my calculator's on my phone and TikTok. It's like, so I'm broadcasting.
So we're 200.
I'm looking for my phone, thinking, where is it? Where is it?
So we're £250 a month. That's what we're doing. Yeah.
So £250 times 12 times 5.
Yes, 3,000. And then we're doing it over 5 years.
Right.
Which is 15.
So £15,000 that is debt that you've just acquired, because you can't get out of that. You're into that for 5 years, so you've just acquired £15,000 of debt, plus the fact you've just bought a car. Oh, but it's an asset, I hear you say.
Which depreciates very quickly. Depreciates the value very quickly.
It depends what you mean as an asset, really, because when is an asset no an asset? When it's a liability. And a car, to me, is a depreciating asset. In other words, it goes down in value. Same like a mobile home. People go, oh, it's a home. It's like, I'm going to buy a holiday home and it's a mobile home. And it's like, that is a depreciating asset. I would not be buying that. Bricks and mortar are where it goes up in value. Mobile homes go down in value over time. They're basically just, they're just basically bothies or terrapins with fancy interiors to them. That's it. They go down in value. They're not bricks and mortar. They don't go up in value. So that is when an asset is really a liability. And so you actually think you've got value. And that's why when you spend £15,000 on a car and you get to the end of 5 years, your car is only worth £3,000.
Yeah.
So you've lost money. That's the argument as well, where people say, maybe I should hire. Maybe I should hire the car. Effectively, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, you do hire purchase.
Yeah, and they're doing hire purchase. So work out what's good for you, but don't commit to too much, I would say. So let's talk about reducing liabilities.
Just before, I just wanted to quickly say a quick hi. Linda's jumped in there. Hi, Linda. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, sorry. What were you going to say there, Jim?
Let's talk about reducing your liabilities. One way to stop adding debt is to create a budget.
Yeah.
Get a budget. Now, so simplistic here. But most people spend more time on planning their next holiday than they do actually creating a financial budget for themselves. It is not difficult, okay? All you need to do is take your... Now, if you're like me, everything goes through your bank account. And I do that deliberately because it disciplines me to see my bank account and it disciplines me to see the transactions that are going through. And when I see Costa, coffee shop.
That's my bank.
And it's like, and then you'd start to tally up. You go, wait a minute. If you've got cash, if you've got this, here it is again. Here's my tenner. I've still got it. If you've got cash, so if you've got cash and you keep spending this, you don't realize it's disappearing out your pocket. So it's better actually to do things through your card, because then you begin to realize and you begin to take a track at and what you're spending it on. Because when you look at the end of the month, most banks actually let you download your statement onto a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Now, for the people that don't understand that, it's easy just to go to pen and paper and just go, look, that's what I brought in every month on my bank statement. So I got my wage, I got maybe money from somewhere else, I got a rebate from somewhere else. So that's what came in every month. But mostly you'll be concentrating on your outgoings. It's like, there's my mortgage, so put my mortgage down. There is my electricity and gas. Put my electricity and gas down. There's my council tax. Put that down. There's this. Put that down. There's my food and my food, my supermarket stuff. Just the food. There's my clothes. There's my for that at that time I was cigarettes. I've
been extortionately expensive.
I've been stopped for years. Last time I bought cigarettes, it was £1.20 a packet. That's how long ago that was. So,
that was a long time ago, Jim.
That was a very long time. Luckily I stopped, and my health's more important. Hence the reason why I've got marathon on. So That's another thing you should do. And alcohol and nights out and music and
leisure and things as well.
Theatre and leisure and all that stuff. Don't just lump it in. Start really putting yourself a task, putting it all down. And then that's when you'll begin to see a real good picture about what you've got, what you're spending on. And then you start to think to yourself, wait a minute. This is like the show we did the other week, the cost of living crisis, where we went through that by detail, and we showed people where you could save about £1,200 a month from what you're currently spending right now, just by being savvy. So that's on a previous show. I think it was episode 31. So
that was a good one.
Watch back on the playlist. So that's how you would do that every single time, and that's when you would go, okay, so I can cut back on this, I can cut back on that. There's certain things you can't cut back on. If you can't get a better mortgage deal, you're stuck with the one you've got. Now, in the credit crunch, I was stuck with the one we've got. I couldn't do anything about it. Because despite the fact I had huge amounts of wealth, it was all in property, and they went, we're not going to lend on property. Just had to suck it up. But at that time as well, you had other outgoing costs. You had things like, heating and lighting and all the rest of it. And I mean, people say, oh, I can't cut back on my heating and lighting. It's like, but years ago, no one had central heating. We had a fire, everybody sat around, and they put more clothes on. We didn't walk around the house like it was Marbella every day, in your pants and t-shirt, and that's it. And
shorts and your sliders.
Yeah, that's essentially what people do nowadays. They didn't have things like a dressing gown or anything like that. They didn't actually cozy up. They didn't put a blanket on themselves. And these are all things you can cut back on if you really want to. Electricity usage, and it's like, wait a minute, I could cut back on my electricity usage. Do I really need to use the tumble dryer every single day? Can I not just get off my arse and going outside and actually hang them out on the rope?
Do you know, I was reading over the weekend, the American fridge freezers are second for the most consumption of electricity, but it's your condenser tumble dryer is number one.
You read that and I read that, but there was some of these figures I think are skewed. A 4-watt bulb was using about 3 times more energy than a 20-watt kettle. And it's like, wait a minute, I know the science. A 20-watt kettle, would burn more than a 4-watt bulb. And you're telling me the 4-watt bulb costs more to run. It's like, I do not believe that for a minute. So I just dismissed that. It's going about doing the rounds now.
Yeah, I've seen it.
It's a pile of shite. And this is why I asked people to substantiate. A boy was on this morning going on my feed going, inflation's going to go to 25%. And I went, okay, so what credible source did you get that from? And he went, it's all over the news. I went, well, I've not heard anything like that in the news. There's 2 things I've heard. The Bank of England predicts that inflation could go to 13%, and the think tank connected to the Bank of England thinks it might be as high as 18%. That's as much as I've heard. Aye. And I said, and here's what I said to him. I've now said, okay, so if you're right and inflation does go to 25%, what will that do to you? And he's going to come back and go, oh my God, my world will fall apart. It'll cost me a fortune. Wait a minute, it'll cost me a fortune and the rest of it. And And the world will be catastrophic. The henny penny, the world's falling in because it's gone to 25%. So I says, okay. And my next question to that is, so do you really want to be right?
And you've not heard anything back.
Well, when you think about it, let's hope you're wrong then. But it's like
definitely.
There's so many people running about going, I'm going to be right. I'm going to be right. Inflation's going to go to 25%. Interest rates are going to go up to 10%. I'm right. But you're rich as well and you've lost your house.
Yeah.
You could be right or you could be rich, but you can't be both. Work that one out. That's a key coming up. You could be right or you could be rich, but you can't be both. The people out there determined to be right, and they're going to end up, if they're right, they're going to lose their homes.
Yeah.
But I'm right. Sorry, kids, you're going to have to live out in the street. I'm right, though. You see the mentality in that?
Yeah.
Idiots out there going about saying, I'm right, I'm going to be right. It's going to be 25%. It's going to be 10% base rates. We're all going to hell in a handbasket, but I'm right. The idiosyncrasy of that whole thing, it's just mental. Anyway, let's go on. Take a look at your current debts and how much you're paying each month. Can you afford to pay more than the minimum each month of your current debts that you've got now? If you can, just that wee bit thing. The snowball effect, as I said, this 1% every single day over a year is 365% improvement, but less than the minus 1% is 365 less. So just make that wee incremental improvement every single day and start paying down that debt. The things you can't afford to pay. The snowball method to decrease your debt. Using this method to pay off the smallest debt. Go for the one with the highest interest rate first, because that's what's costing you the most. So things like your credit cards and that, if you can't get them onto another, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of rolling your money over to an interest-free, another lender, because you're just prolonging the inevitable. I'm more a fan of being disciplined right now to get
put money on it, to
get your bloody act together and do something about it, because the shit's going to hit the fan. Let's be honest about this, and you better buckle down right now. And that's the reality. That's what's happening. I've no bones about that. There's compelling evidence now. I base everything on facts, but there's compelling evidence. You can't ignore what the Bank of England's saying, what the government's saying, what everybody else is saying, and even the utilities companies are actually saying the same thing as well.
Do you know what we spoke about over the weekend, Jim? And I've seen somebody's comment on social media, and it's just somebody's opinion, but it's obviously wrong. And they're like, oh, what they're going about with this, the current crisis, and it was like, what crisis? But as we said at the weekend, the current situation, we're only at the beginning. It's still to come. So
delusional. There will be something that will happen. It's natural. I mean, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger actually talk about this every single time. They talk about, and then what? So they talk about every single time when you pump money into an economy and quantitative ease and keep pumping money in, there's going to be a ramification later on. And it's like what I said about fixing something. Once you fix something, it always breaks something else.
Yeah,
it's inevitable. It's the yin and the yang. It happens every single time. As soon as you fix a problem, it creates a problem. It's the easiest way of saying that is medicines. You take a medicine, and the next minute you've got to take something to counteract the medicine for the other effect it has on you. You get that, don't you? It's like I've got to take these 20 million tablets, and it's like
because I'm taking these other tablets.
I've got to take this one to sort my problem with my liver, but I've got to take these 5 other tablets because I've got to. The
tablet you're taking gives you like indigestion or whatever,
the reactions to it. So I've got to take 5 other tablets to actually,
counteract it.
But then when you take these 5 other tablets, the toll it's taken on your body is the ramifications again. So it's always, and then what? You've got to remember that everything that happens, there's going to be a repercussion of what's happening. And I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean there's always a ramification about what happens next and what's happening next. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, they've been here a lot more years than us, more successful. They are billionaires for Berkshire Hathaway, and they know exactly what they're talking about. The nuts and bolts of creating wealth is right there in a masterclass every single time they boys open their mouth. People can laugh at them and go, you don't know anything about TikTok and all the rest of it. It's like, these boys are nuts and bolt wealth creators. They're on a different field completely. They're on a different plateau. If we're on the planet Earth, they're away in the next solar system and the next galaxy completely. They know exactly what's going on and how to what's coming next and how to resolve it. So let's get back to when you paid off the smallest debt, put the amount previously paid towards your next smallest debt. So in other words, when you paid off the highest interest rate, then put that money you're paying off the higher interest rate towards the next one that you're putting to as well. And just keep doing that. When you get a salary increase, don't run out and spend it. Don't think, I've got another 200 quid. Let's go and get another car. Because we can't be bothered going to the bus stop, or we can't be bothered sharing the cars. It's like, forget it. Take that 200 quid and start investing it or start paying down existing debt.
Yeah.
Because you don't know you've got it anyway, because it's an increase. You'll never miss it. That's what I've done all these years. I pay myself with different sources, by the way, but in my day-to-day job, I'm actually paying myself less in my day-to-day job than I was when I first started. But I still make more money.
Yeah.
And I keep more money. That's the key. That's how wealthy people think. It's an entirely different plane. When they talk about, I pay no tax, it's like, yeah, you don't pay any tax as an individual, but your company does pay tax that you own. They pay them. So it's all it is they pay the same amount of tax to the economy, but all they do is they pay it in a different way through their company rather than through themselves. So they keep more money for themselves in their hand. That is the secret for wealthy people. That's why they remain wealthy and super wealthy. I'm not talking about rich. Rich just makes a lot of money. Rich people make money and they're still broke at a different level. That's rich.
Rich and wealthy are two different things, and we've done a show on that as well.
Because I got my Rolls Royce, but it's costing me £3,000 a month. I'm making 100,000, but I'm £3,000 a month on my Rolls Royce that I always wanted. It's like, you're nuts. You're an idiot. And I'll say that. You're an idiot. Rich people are still broke at a different level. And I tell you, poor people are probably just as well off as the rich person, to be honest. Because the rich person probably has even more stress because they have to keep on the hamster wheel to keep that money flowing because they've got more to lose. And often I used to let them. People that were on the dole, I used to envy them. It's like, you can go down the pub every day and just sit in the pub and not have a care in the world. And that's kind of how you saw it, and that's how people that are rich actually see that. Because they are broke at a different level. They've still got all these bigger. They've just got bigger debts. Wealthy people don't have that at all. Wealthy people are on a totally different planet, totally different plane, play by totally different rules. But they play by the rules that anybody can still play by. You just have to learn how to know these rules and how to work these rules for your benefit and your circumstances. That's the key here. See how I'm giving all these keys? Keith Cunningham talks about the keys to the vault, and his book, The Keys to the Vault. He talks about this is one of the keys. I'm going to tell you one of the keys right now, and that's why I keep referring to it as a word as key. It's not because of that, because I know that is one of the keys to this vault to get that wealth and get that right next to that. Another option called the debt avalanche is to focus on paying the debt with the highest interest rate first. This is what
we just spoke about that.
Aim on that because you're paying the higher interest rate, which actually takes more of your money to service. Therefore, if you pay that quicker, you have that money that you're servicing the debt with as well, back quicker as well, and that will do it. I'm a big fan of the debt avalanche, getting the highest one first.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one is do the smallest one first so you can pay these off quicker. Higher interest rate can keep you in debt longer with payments going towards monthly interest charges, as I'd said in the actual balance. Ask your credit card or loan issuers for a lower interest rate. Did you know you can ask your credit card issuer
to lower your interest rate?
A lower interest rate, yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, of course. Hey, if you didn't ask, you're not going to get.
Yeah, that's true.
This is what I said about the Netflix thing. It's like, I'm leaving because it's going to cost me too much. Disney, I'm leaving because it's going to cost me too much. And then what happened for them is the classic example. They go, oh, well, we'll give you a 6-month sabbatical. We'll give it for 6 months. We'll give you a reduced rate. And then we'll put you back on the normal rate again. That's exactly what they do. So if you can demonstrate extenuating circumstances, or maybe point something out that you maybe didn't know. In other words, maybe exaggerate the truth a bit with them. Possibly they might give you a dispensation. I would say that. Okay, we've got a couple of questions on TikTok here. Are you the guy that borrowed these? I have no idea what this guy is saying. I have a flat and I'm struggling to find a mortgage provider that will let me release the money in a studio flat. So that's a good question, actually. Listen, touch base with us. Just message us direct. This is somebody on TikTok I'm talking to.
I know.
Direct, email us. You can message us direct on the post, and we'll pick up that post privately. And we'll get you in touch with somebody who can actually do that for you. And he says, do you have one that you could recommend? Absolutely. Kessa Salimi, Freedom Financial in Dundee. Yeah. He's the man for your job. He's brilliant at that. That is what he specialises in. He's a landlord and investor himself. That's the person I would actually go to. But if you just want these details firmed up, I'm more than happy to put them in the messages later on. Anyway, apart from that, when you've paid off the smallest debt, put the amount previously towards the next. High interest rates can keep you in debt longer, as I said. If you have a history of paying your bills on time, you may have room to negotiate. That's another one as well. If you're a good payer, they still give you room to negotiate as well, which will allow you to move high interest rate balances from other credit cards to other credit cards with lower interest rate balances that are more competitive. And then still keep, just because you've reduced it, just do it. Just pay it off. I do every single time. I do not pay interest on any credit cards. I use the credit card, pay off at the end of the month, every single time. Come hell or high water, I'm using their money, but I'm also getting the insurance back, because if anything happens with the company I've paid it to, I can get that money back because it's through the credit card, because it's a personal thing under the consumer laws. And so that's why I'm using credit cards to do that. I'm using it for our advantage. But most of these credit card companies pay on people that would actually take advantage of them. Classic example is I walked into a furniture store one day and I said, 0 interest for the next 3 months, for the next 3 years. I went, I'm going to take that. And the boy laughed and says, because I says, I'll pay it off in 3 years' time. And he went, there's nobody pays it off in 3 years' time. You're joking. Well, I'll pay it off. And I did. Because I got their money free for the next 3 years, but then I made sure I just put the money aside to pay it off in 3 years' time. And I actually made money on the money that their money was, because I took that money and bought another house with it. and I made money with I made money on my sofa. And I've still got that sofa today. That's how much I take care of them. We've had the sofa a leather sofa I bought 25 years, and we've been gluing it and stitching it for the last couple of years, and I will not let go of that, because there's nothing wrong with it and it works for the job. And I've been making a fortune off of that sofa I bought all these years, and I made a fortune with the money that they actually gave me free.
Interest,
I had the money to pay it. I had the money to pay for it there and then. Okay. So what I did was I just said, okay, I'll just keep that money and I'll go and put it as a deposit for another house, and I'll take your interest only for the next 3 years, and then I'll pay it off in 3 years' time. And that's when they laughed. And then it's like, well, but it worked every single time. So if you can get interest free and you know you're in a position to pay it off in that period of time, take advantage of these companies to do that. They're there for that reason. If you know how to work it and work that system, which we talk about in here most of the time, we might actually do a show on how to work the system.
That's a good one.
That'll be a good one. So what is net worth? Just to finalize this, your net worth is the value of total assets minus your total liabilities or debts. It's pretty easy to calculate your net worth. Just add up your assets, take away your liabilities, and you're left with that. Now, when is a liability not a liability? We're just going to cover this at the end. When is a liability an asset, and when is an asset a liability? Now, I'm going to be controversial here and say to people that the house you live in is actually a liability. Because the house you live in every single day is not really an asset. It is an asset in accountancy terms, but to you, it costs you money every single day to service that debt on that house.
You've got outlays every day.
And you're relying on that going up in value. And if that doesn't go up in value, it's not really an asset, is it? Because the debt is outweighing the asset value. So it can be a stage. But my house itself has now become an asset. Now, why has my house itself become an asset? Because I've gone and bought my next house already. So I now have my next house bought already. We're going to move to. So everything that accumulates in wealth here, because you know how proportionally the house that you live in right now only moves up in value, but you're moving to the next house anyway, and that's how you're using it. So it's really a liability because it costs you money every day. And what's happening is you're just trading that for the next house in the same value. But because I've locked in the value of my house right now, my next house right now at this value, every day that house prices go up and this house I'm living in right now goes up, I'm now making all that money, as well as making money on my next house because I've got that rented. So I'm now accumulating money for definite in my own house now. It is no longer a liability. It is an asset in its entirety. Hopefully everybody will understand that. What I mean by that, it's how to create wealth overall, and it's how to do that. We talked about how does the house become a liability because you're paying money every day, but we're indoctrinated into this. We're you know yourself. Go to school, get a job. Go to school, get a job, get an education, get student debt, get a mortgage to buy your next house. So our whole system's indoctrinated into getting your debt all the time. But you have to work out whether that debt is actually a good debt to you to allow you to move on to build wealth for that reason. And the most logical one I talk about is the debt for mortgages to buy to let. The mortgage, I see a buy to let mortgage as an asset. Definitely. Now, we just talked about mortgages being a liability, but I see a buy to let mortgage as an asset because it's an asset to me, because it's me taking someone else's money and actually making more money on their money. So to me, it's actually an asset. The house that I'm buying to do that as well is an asset because it's going to make money for me.
Yeah.
Money it generates is an asset. So see how that's all working? How everything involved in property investment is actually an asset. The repairs I do on a property I am renting is an asset because it's an investment in that property to keep it improved, to increase the value. So everything I'm doing is assets. Everything I'm doing in property investment is assets, regardless. My tax that I pay to property investment because I'm making money, my tax that I pay to the government is, guess what? An asset.
Yeah.
Do you know why it's an asset? Because it invests the money in the system that keeps me okay. It collects all my rubbish. It, looks after me for the National Health Service. But more importantly, it's an asset to me because if I'm paying money in my tax, I must be making money. So that's how I view it again. So I can't see anything how it wouldn't be an asset every single time. Just to the guy on the TikTok, did you say Kessa Salimi? Absolutely. Kessa's your man. Tell him we sent you in your direction. He'll look after you all the time. He's based in Dundee. His company's called Freedom Financial. Okay, that was just me covering TikTok. I've got a funny feeling the live disappears, you see. The text later on disappears. It's kind of like YouTube. You can't find it later on. You can't answer.
Yeah, I think it.
So it's quite difficult to actually do that. So we're at the end of the show.
Yeah.
we never even got to talk about.
I was going to say there's still stuff to cover, but I mean we've got many shows to come, and we could put all these.
Wait, I talk about Jess and Jinx. I was doing the numbers today, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, well, we've got that still to cover. We could cover that next week or another time.
It's like it blew me away, Richard. Actually, when I looked at that Jess and Jinx and what it was. I mean, literally, I was looking at these numbers. And I was sitting looking to myself thinking, flipping heck, I've got 710,000 in assets in Jess and Jinx, and none of them's got a mortgage on them yet, and they're all producing money every single month on rentals. And that's the money I took from the borrowing that I did from the other limited company. So I took borrowing out of the other limited company, I lent it to Jess and Jinx. Jess and Jinx then made more money with that money from the other company who was making money as well. So I've got one company making money, I've got the next company making even more money, and then I'll take that money again, and I'll get the next company making even more money with that money. And it's like I'm recycling that cash every single time. Yeah. And all it's doing is making continuous amounts of money. It's a money machine.
Infinite returns.
It's like, my God. It's like if people understood what this was like and how you could leverage yourself and I don't talk about leveraging a hugely. Don't go to 95 and 100%. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about within tolerance and make sure the numbers work. But we've talked about that in successive shows or previous shows before. So go back and watch. That's my advice. Go back to our YouTube channel, look up the Wealth Creation playlist, and actually listen to these. You've got the podcast as well on our podcast channel as well on our website. So if you get on Anchor and look up Fife Properties on Anchor, you'll see all our Wealth Creation shows on all the podcasts we've done as well. So you can hear all some podcasts if you've not got the time to watch shows. And it's they're master classes in actually how to develop and increase your wealth every single time. Okay, Richard, let's wrap up.
Okay. I think for me, I think people obviously on a smaller scale than what you've been talking about, Jim, with yourself, but I mean, assess your own situation, look at what your assets and liabilities are, look how you could reduce your liabilities, look at your assets, how you could maybe leverage them, or how you could use maybe liabilities, potentially, obviously, if you're getting the potential to have money and things, to leverage that to enhance your current position.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. That's us at the end. Yeah. I wish I could have talked about everything else and all the things I'm doing.
We did have quite a lot on the schedule for today.
Yeah, but then you know what? It's we've always got something else to talk about. We've always got something else to teach people. We've always got something else to even teach ourselves. I mean, the very fact that I'm talking to you about all this actually reinforces it in my mind, and therefore it makes these decisions a lot easier for me in the future.
Definitely.
So tune in next week, Wealth Creation Show. We'll be talking about something else. Again, it's going to add value to what you're doing. And until next week, guys, it's bye-bye from us.
Bye.